My presentation for today will focus on the Sino-Japanese infrastructure diplomacy under Duterte's Build program. Japan and China have used their economic prowess to promote economic development and help the developing world in closing the infrastructure gap. Infrastructure investment has recently become an area of competition between Beijing and Tokyo, with hopes of expanding political influence and generating high economic returns for their national economies. The previous Philippine administrations have always emphasized the infrastructure gap in the country. However, there was little room for an extensive campaign on infrastructure development. Nevertheless, the legal framework to increase the funding mechanism for infrastructure projects were laid down through the passage of the Official Development Assistance Act of 1996 that excluded ODA in the foreign debt limit. Its amendment in 1998 urged the use of ODA for equitable development. SICOT argues that preference for ODA as a source of funding has been sought for large-scale infrastructure projects to augment national budgetary constraints. To this end, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte has made infrastructure development as the centerpiece of his presidency. The Build program was launched in 2017 with an aim to close the infrastructure gap in the country by increasing infrastructure spending from 5.4% of the gross domestic product in 2017 to 7.3% of the GDP in 2022. The infrastructure flagship projects are the most urgent projects that are expected to contribute in achieving the country's development goals by improving connectivity and stimulating growth across the country. In 2017, the Philippine government approved 75 IFPs and was later revised to 100 in 2019. Out of the 134 IFPs were sought for ODA funding, thus providing an investment opportunity for China and Japan. Against this backdrop, this research aims to answer the following questions. First, how has China and Japan's infrastructure diplomacy helped the Duterte administration materialize its build projects? Second, what were the political and diplomatic goals achieved by the three countries? This research aims to investigate the background and motivations of Japan and China's ODA policy, review the ODA of China and Japan in the Philippines before the BBB, determine the Chinese and Japanese commitments in the BBB together with the latest available status, and lastly, assess the policy goals of the three countries. For the methodology, this study adopts a qualitative and descriptive research design, while secondary data from official government sources, official press releases, official reports from development agencies, and analysis from journal articles. Japan's bilateral assistance comes in three kinds. First, technical cooperation. Second, ODA loan. And three, grant aids. Through the years, Japan's ODA charter has undergone transformative changes shaped by its external and domestic conditions. First, it was released in 1992 and had undergone revision in 2003 and was later renamed as Development Cooperation Charter in 2015. Under the DCC, the principles of human rights, democracy, and human security are promoted, and cooperation for non-military purposes in pursuit of peace and prosperity were added. Through this, Japanese corporations may add their operations through ODA recipients, and the said charter complements Prime Minister Abe's infrastructure initiative, the Partnership for Quality Infrastructure, that aims to close the infrastructure gap in Asia and promote inclusive and quality economic growth. Japan's ODA in the Philippines complements the identified needs and priorities of the past Philippine presidents, such as the ODA for the energy sector to address the power shortages during the Ramos presidency, and the peace-building efforts in Mindanao under President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's administration. The Japanese government has also made it to a point that its ODA in Manila are leaning towards inclusive, equitable, and participatory development, which are all integral to the future of the country. However, despite of this, concerns on the Japanese ODA were raised, such as the bias towards Japanese industrial standards, bias towards Japanese companies and their capital goods, infrastructure projects that cause displacement of the indigenous peoples and their livelihood, and also environmental destruction. China's track record as a development partner has gained momentum in the past decade together with its robust economic growth. China has challenged the Western established aid architecture by having an equal partnership aid that is mutually beneficial. Chinese ODA are also absent of stringent conditionalities, thus respecting the sovereignty and non-interfering on the domestic affairs of the recipient country. Further, China adopts a development first approach that takes into account the local development needs of the recipients contingent upon the country's chosen development path and national interest. President Xi Jinping extended China's commitment to providing aid and advancing economic interests to the Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. In the context of Philippines and China relations, the recognition of the One China policy and normalization of ties halted the support for the local communist movement and the grant of $30 million in 1980. Chinese-funded projects such as the North Railway Luzon Project and the National Broadband Network were linked to the corruption scandals of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The North Railway project, with a $90 million funding from China since 2004, only had a 15% completion rate in 2010. Landingin in 2020 reveals that Arroyo's administration was attracted to the 3% annual interest rate, 5-year grace period, and 20-year maturity loan period despite the irregularities on the supply agreement. The project also did not undergo the competitive bidding process in the Philippine government as it was packaged as an executive agreement. For the findings, in 2020, the cumulative total of ODA from Japan reached $8,513 million US dollars, while China's ODA pledge was at $590 million US dollars. In terms of grants, Japan's ODA grant totaled to 74.67 million as compared to China's 127.66 million US dollars. Japan's pledged ODA loans were higher compared to China with an amount of 11,110 million, while China's pledge was at $493.08 million. From the 34 ODA-funded IFPs, 14 IFPs are funded by Japan, while the remaining 6 are handled by China. In terms of ODA loans, Japan's commitment reached $6,800 million US dollars, which is equivalent to the 14 projects, as compared to China's 212 million US dollars, which are garnered from the 3 projects. As for the ODA grants, Japan only has 1 ODA grant with an amount of $18.20 million, while China has pledged 3 projects with a combined total of $493.08 million US dollars. In terms of physical status, NEDA reported in 2020 that 7 Japan-assisted IFPs are in the pre-construction stage, while 7 are in the construction stage. As for China, 3 IFP projects are in the pre-construction stage, 2 are under construction, and 1 is pending for government approval. Because of the long list of Japanese-funded IFP projects, a joint committee was established to oversee the implementation of Japan's projects. Moreover, 3 railway IFPs are awarded to Japan, in which the most expensive IFP, the Metro Manila subway, is awarded to Japan. Although there are only 6 Chinese ODA projects, the skepticism on Chinese ODA was a recurring issue as it garnered mixed reactions from the public sector, the academe, and from foreign governments. However, China is still an integral partner of the Philippine government in materializing the Build IFP projects. For the first part of the discussion, the Philippine government focused on narrowing the development gap, thus prioritizing the funding of IFPs, giving little or no attention on the China and Japanese rivalry on infrastructure investment. Moreover, the BBB initiative was complementary to China's BRI and AIIB and Japan's PQI, thus paving way for ODA pledges for the program. In the context of Japan and Philippine relations, Tokyo has established and continues to maintain its commitment as a reliable development partner of Manila. The Japanese government has earned the trust and confidence of the Philippines as its 3 to 5 decade-old infrastructure projects are still being used by the Filipinos. Moreover, due to the long-time engagement between Manila and Tokyo, Japan has been familiar with the bureaucratic processes in the Philippines. Again, as an attestation to the confidence and trust of the Philippines, the most expensive IFP is awarded to Japan with a total cost of 4.2 billion US dollars. Unlike China, Japan does not have any political tension with the Philippines, thus having economic cooperation, investment, infrastructure as the foundation of the bilateral ties. In the case of China and the Philippines, diplomatic tensions between the two countries were toned down as Manila decided to focus on infrastructure development as the center of bilateral relations. Further, China's ODA package has attracted President Duterte due to its payment terms, the policy of non-conditionality, and non-interference in domestic affairs. Despite of the concerns raised on Chinese aid, ranging from falling to debt trap, sustainability, and quality of Chinese-made infrastructure, and using aid as a political concession on the territorial dispute on the West Philippine Sea, China is still welcome as an integral partner for the Build. China has also instituted its own aid standards outside of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, thus raising concerns about its aid packages. Nevertheless, Manila would serve as an avenue for China to prove the quality and resilience of its infrastructure projects. In the context of Japan and China competition, the Japanese government has resorted to providing ODA ever since the 1960s, thus gaining the trust of its allies and having the opportunity to export its development experience among its neighbors. Japan's ODA has generated positive results and contributed to the economic growth and development of the Philippines and also the Southeast Asian countries. Moreover, the Philippines has preferred Japanese ODA for railway projects such as the Metro Manila Subway, North-South Commuter Railway Project, and the Manila to Los Baños Railway due to Tokyo's advanced and quality railway systems. Beijing's status as an emerging partner in recent years has attracted the attention of countries with diverse development levels. The absence of stringent conditionalities in Chinese ODA is deemed attractive in the developing world. However, the quality of infrastructure still remains a question. ODA recipients are also skeptical on the hidden intentions of the Chinese ODA, as the debt trap diplomacy experience in other countries has raised concerns on the provisions of the Chinese loan agreements. To conclude, Japan and China have used their current position to establish aid agencies to help the developing world in achieving economic growth, development, and enhancing connectivity. President Duterte's capability to mobilize foreign funding for the BBB deserves credit in respect of improving the national competitiveness and improving the quality of life of Filipinos. In retrospect, President Xi Jinping and former Prime Minister Abe has helped the Philippines jumpstart its IFPs through pledging millions worth of funds and providing their technical expertise in infrastructure projects. ODA-funded IFPs are still undergoing construction, hence only time can tell if these projects are excellent quality and has been utilized by the general public for its intended use. The Philippines views the participation and support of China and Japan as fundamental in closing the infrastructure gap in the Philippines and helping us achieve the Filipino dream. Rather than letting political interest dictate the course of action, infrastructure development takes the driver's seat in promoting collaboration and economic growth. Thank you, and that ends my presentation.